Did you really move?
Yeah.
I'm just giving you a hard time. I shouldn't have done that.
All right, we're going to call the City Commission work session to order. Can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith. Here. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Denise McGriff and Mayor Dan Holliday will be absent this evening.
All right, so first item on the agenda is the Downtown Transportation Survey results and Transportation Demand Management Plan update. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Kelly Reed, planner at the city.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Laura. We just have a quick update for you today, and Rick Williams from Rick Williams Consulting is here to present the results of our travel behavior survey or transportation survey that we did for the downtown area late fall. As you know, we have a transportation demand management working group that is working to implement our transportation demand management plan for downtown. This is one of our first projects that we've engaged in. The purpose of the survey was really to gather data on how people get to and from downtown, especially people who work downtown, who come there every day. We want to know how they're getting there. The results of the survey will help us identify the strategies that are going to work well in Oregon City. There are TDM plans and efforts going on all over the region and all over the country. What works in one place might not work here, so these results will really show us what's going to be effective over time. Also, another way we can use the data in this survey is to help us prioritize the transportation improvements and investments that we're going to make downtown in upcoming years, and then also to track people's behavior over time to really measure the success of our efforts as we move forward. So Rick's here to give you the results, and then we can answer questions if you have any questions about them. And then at the end, I just want to give you a quick update on other related projects that are coming up or that are underway. Yeah.
Can you please state your name and city or record?
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Rick Williams. I'm with Rick Williams Consulting. We're a transportation and demand management planning firm in Portland, Oregon. It's nice to be here, and it's great to work with Kelly and her team. As Kelly said, the purpose of this was to begin a baseline of data. One of the things that we put together the TDM plan, and then the TDM work group was formed to implement the plan. And one of the first things we realized is there's not a lot of good data or any data that has really been collected to get a sense of how people are actually accessing the downtown, whether they be residents, visitors, or employees. And so we wanted to establish a baseline, and this is just the first of what the plan calls for ongoing updates using now a tool we've created, the online survey, so that, as Kelly said, when we implement strategies, we know that the strategies are supported by those who they would impact to hopefully affect changes in their behavior, but also as a way to measure our success. And if we're not successful, the ability to reassess what we're doing and revise and use good data and good information to do that. So it's really a way to make good decisions. What we did is we created an online survey tool, and we worked with Kelly's staff and the work group to finalize that survey, and then we put it up online and had great help from the downtown business group to get the word out to take the survey. We also did in-person intercept surveys. We put staff out on the streets, by the elevator in the downtown, and simply asked people to take the survey with us. So you had an online opportunity, and then we also were person to person with people. We also gave information to all businesses downtown to encourage their employees to take the survey online. We sent dozens of letters to downtown properties, again, trying to get the word out to please take the survey. There were 38 questions total in all that were asked. 16 questions were everybody would answer them, and then people would self-identify, and there were another set of questions for business owners only, and then another 6 questions just for employees. And so we really broke it down. The incentive was a chance to win a prize. We had a participation for 1 of 4 prizes, and overall we had 709 responses. And we're hoping that'll go up every year, but we think, again, now we've created like political campaigns, we've created our campaign staff in the field, and the next time we'll even be more effective in getting the word out and getting survey responses in. Some key findings of all respondents at the highest level, and this is not surprising because, again, this is an effort that we're beginning to work to change behavior of people downtown. But 88% of people, of all respondents, said that they drive their car to get downtown. That's a very high rate. Most rated their walking experience. So once they were downtown, what it was like to walk downtown, they really like it. And that's not surprising, I think, to all of you. Just before the meeting started, we talked about how beautiful your downtown is. So people have a nice walking experience downtown, although there were written comments that they were allowed to provide in the survey itself, where they could tell us where they thought there were areas of concern. 10th and Main was brought up as a concern area. So as we put that into our plan of things to address, we know that that could be a low-hanging fruit to help people and show progress in the report if we use this data to target some of our solutions. And 10th and Main might be one of those to get into the planning process if it already isn't. Transit and
Were they
bike.
allowed to elaborate as why they felt 10th and Main was unsafe to them?
I think it's sight lines, a congestion point, time to cross, people, speed of cars. But we can get more detail for that, Commissioner, because we have all of those individual comments in the larger report, and we can refine that.
Yeah.
I think it's just a high pedestrian crossing area and a congested area in the downtown. But it came up more so than other areas. The transit and bike experience was not particularly rated well, indicating there's a lot of room for improvement here. That's everything from the condition of the transit center, the frequency of service, lack of bike facilities, safety, the feeling of safety, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's room for improvement there, and that will inform the work of the work group. Then there were a few comments, as I just did mention, about the condition of the transit center. Support for light rail connections and support for local shuttles.
So when you gather those comments, are those gathered because of frequency or intensity? I mean, the bike people, how many, did you have a lot of respondents about bikes, or you had a small group that was very fervent about it?
That's a great question. Actually, we took all of the written comments. These would be, we had our 30-some questions, and so that's pretty targeted. We then offered people an opportunity to just make written comments. We then sorted the written comments into category areas, transit, bike, walk, and then looked at them simply thematically, not statistically. And so those last comments were really, of the comments, again, it's selected, of the comments made, these were the more common themes presented. But as we know in all online surveys, some of it is self-selecting. So that's why it's good that this is a baseline, so we can see if those comments change over time. So the written comments are not statistically valid, but it gives us a sense of where people are at today.
And how does a survey prevent a repetitive?
Great point.
How does that?
Someone taking the survey over and over again.
30, 40 times.
We have the ability to look at where the comment came from, and if we see the same, is it IP address? Everybody has a unique address.
Okay.
And if we see, and if you look at the larger survey, we show some of the surveys we dropped. We didn't accept the comments because it was coming from the same address. So we factor for that and account for it.
Very good. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for the question. So other key findings from, again, all respondents, a desire for more parking, particularly for longer term parking, not necessarily as opposed to visitor parking, although I think there's an overall desire for parking regardless. But there was a limited awareness of the existing longer term parking options that are available in the downtown on private lots, and options that could be available at the elevator. You take the elevator up and use options up there. So that kind of helps us think about in the future communications and signage plans. People with mobility issues who are not available to park above the elevator or a great distance away, we started to see that they are currently impacted by on-street parking because of the congestion downtown. A call for better wayfinding and marketing of all the various parking and transportation options. People just aren't aware of what's out there. And then over 50%, though, of employees expressed a willingness to consider using alternative modes to get to work. And I'll give you some data on what they said would have to change to make them consider that. But at least there's an openness. I think the bottom line, again, is from an online survey, there's an openness to look at other alternatives. But still, 88% of the people who come downtown come by car. This is just a real quick so you can see that we really got good, even of the 700 respondents, we got a good cross-section of everybody. It wasn't heavily weighted to any one user group. 56% female, 35% male. The age categories are about 20%, 20%, 20% across the board. Less than... people whose home location is less than 3 miles from downtown, 3 to 5 miles from downtown, 5 miles or farther. It's a pretty good distribution, although we do know that the number one zip code was 97045. 65% of the people who responded are from Oregon City, and that's good. That means they're using the downtown and working downtown, living in Oregon City and working in Oregon City. So we asked them to think about their most recent trips to downtown and how did they travel to the area. And as I said, 88% said they drive. And again, this is all respondents. We'll see a little bit here on employees in a second. And 39% drive alone. And then there's a combination of carpools, driving alone but parking above the elevator, drove alone with others. But what's interesting for us, for all respondents, when you compare it to other larger cities, was the walk or ran. A lot of people jog to work these days, but 6% of all respondents, that's employees and visitors, walk to downtown. And you can see that we have a pretty high percentage of people who live within 3 miles. And again, that's a metric we want to grow in the future. We want to get more information because we want more than 700 responses. Very few come by bus, fewer by bike. The impact of Uber and Lyft and taxis so far from this sample is not as significant as some people might think the trend is, across the region. So there's all the people who drive and most who drive to downtown, and that's about 650, almost 700 people. Their primary way to get to Oregon City is by car, come downtown. So we asked people where they park. 82% of people park on street. And again, when we read comments and looked at other questions within the larger survey, there's that lack of awareness of where it really is available. So that means that employees and visitors are parking on street, whether it's at a meter, whether it's at a free stall on the edges of downtown, whether it's above the elevator. But only 4% are paying to park off-street. 14% are off-street in free parking facilities. But most everything, the first choice, and that's not unusual, the first choice is everybody wants to park on street. So that goes to that lack of awareness of what could be available. And the TDM plan calls for working more through a shared use program with private facilities that have identified parking availability. For people's perception of transit, as you can see, it's kind of in the middle, 35, and this is employees versus non-employees. It's right there. It's not good nor bad, but it's not great. And so again, that's something we can work on. And then we take the comments, the written comments that people gave us, and we can start to target those things. It's the safety, it's the frequency, it's the condition of the transit center. So we can look at what's driving that. Again, the walking experience was much higher. Really good, fantastic experience to very good experience for all users of the downtown, employees and non-users. But through the comments, and we'll get them more and more as we do this more often, we've got some targeted areas that will make it even better. Biking experience, not so much like the transit, but not great. it's mostly to the neutral to it could be a better experience. And again, the written comments are going to help us. Bike lanes, bike facilities, bike racks, signage, safety improvements, etc. And here's what was kind of interesting. We asked people first if you could make 3 transportation investments. So if you had $1 to spend on improving transportation downtown, what would you spend it on? And not surprisingly, more off-street parking. But I won't hold that thought. It's the way we ask the question. If you had $1 to spend today, so it's mostly into more parking, but non-employees we're saying more long-term parking options, which is interesting because our parking data suggests that they don't stay that long downtown, but they may be saying, I want to stay longer. So it's an interesting input, and we have to get more detailed on that and think about that some more as we look at how we how we format our on-street system. But then we ask them, if you drive alone, would any of the following transportation improvements or programs lead you to consider taking alternative options? And this is where I said earlier, 50% said they're open, but certain changes would need to be made. If these changes were made and we measured it later on, would that question we just asked previously change in terms of we need more parking, we need more parking, we need more parking? They said that if you could improve transit service, improve even further walking or running routes, and look at the number of employees, it's a small sample, but again, just for thematically, 43% want to have a better way to walk to work, which kind of matches up with that 97045 zip code, we think. And then improve bicycle facilities. So the focus is on parking because there's not an awareness or an availability of options. And so that's a thematic conclusion, not a statistical conclusion. But I think that's something that the work group can kind of get their minds around and put some effort into now. And then we'll continue to follow up with these types of surveys.
So real quickly, do you know, and Liz from DOCA may know, but do you know an estimated number of employees that work downtown? Not how many filled out the survey,
Right.
How many do you think
We're
work
working
downtown?
on that. About 3,000. Yeah.
Okay.
So we got to get it up. I think we got about 10% of that, and we want to get that higher. That's why, again, online surveys are always tough. So now just looking at employees and some of the really bright spots on employees. So if you look at how employees, the ones that responded, we had about 883 trips represented on a weekday. And so the average for everybody is 88% drive alone or take a motorcycle. 77% of employees who live within 3 miles drive, which is different. I mean, it means that they're not driving as frequently as those others, but almost 15% of them are walking. And so again, there's potential here. But again, as you get, not surprisingly, as you get further away from downtown, the transit options, awareness of them, or the availability of them recede, and therefore you can see 3 to 5 miles, almost 95%, almost everybody drives. But again, we see that as potential. And on the weekend, as you can see, the walk-run is 18.5%. So maybe it's a little more casual, or maybe how the weather here is. Maybe sometimes the weather is better on weekends. But the average was 9% for employees to walk. And on weekends, it's almost 19%, pushing 20%. That's really good numbers, at least as a beginning point for us to start with. We didn't get a lot of businesses to respond directly. We mailed to them and went door to door, but they responding, self-selecting as a business owner, we didn't get as many as we want. So again, this is really marginal data here. But those who we did talk to or who took the survey, about half of them provide free parking for their employees, while only a few of those provide any sort of an incentive for an alternative mode. So everybody gets the benefit, the value. I can't put a cash value on, but if you ask us to, we probably could. They're getting a freebie on parking, but they're on their own. if they have to buy a transit pass or if they want to come in another mode. So that it's, again, low-level response. We want to further pursue that because that's a dynamic we could change or want to change. And then approximately 40% of businesses provide free parking for their customers, which is okay because we have the on-street system. We would like it if they were providing parking off-street for our customers because our on-street system's getting pretty full. So that's a positive. So, and then this gives you, it's again, a small sample. We wish we would have got more from businesses because we hit every one of them. But of what came, professional offices of that sample was the primary business downtown. But you can see you've got a really good mix of businesses downtown. And we want to work harder to get a 100% sample on that. Somehow we should be able to get that. Does your organization, I've already talked about this. This goes back to the previous slide on providing free parking for employees versus free parking for visitors. And we want to work on that. And we'd love to get more visitors off street. We'd really like to get almost all employees off street or into an alternative mode eventually, as the work plan would have us want to do. And with that, there's a 58-page report with all the details in it. But we're going to take these findings, and the key is to sit down now with the work group and have them really put their minds around it and say, what are low-hanging fruits? What are issues we believe we can make progress on? What's the best expense of our time and resources now to change the dial? And I think we've got a lot of good information to do that with this plan.
Okay, thank you. Have any questions? Commissioner Smith?
So is this intended to be an annual updated?
Rick is under contract to do this again in 2021,
Okay.
Which is funded by our grant. And then we hope to do it probably every 2 years or so going forward.
What did we gain? What did we learn from this survey in terms of different questions or new questions that might be added next round?
Your question is a great question, but it's kind of premature for us because we want to sit down with the work group. But I think any input you guys have is also good because we have our initial list of 36 questions and we want to vet them not only to make sure with our public outreach people that we're not biasing a question by asking it, but also did we miss a question or could we reframe a question or even ask the same question twice in a different way to try to cross. So that's probably premature, but that would be before the next survey that we do that. We also want to make sure we stay apples to apples though.
Right. There's a couple mentions, there was at least a mention in the survey and a couple questions that could allow people to continue on in touching more specifically the elevator. Because when I first went through this, I thought there's not enough
About the elevator.
And I felt that was a glaring omission. There is nods to that, but I think with a facility that we so completely control, I think we really want to hone in on how the elevator is being used. And I know downtown's done a lot of work with their counters on that, partly because we, in the first time that we have in a long time, extended the elevator hours in the last few years. And one of my questions definitely is, have we extended it enough? Do we need to extend it more? That's something we could do tomorrow. That's something we could do now. And so I think that's something really crucial that we need to know, especially when you look at the input of, we can kind of assume that a lot of people that are parking outside of the district are unaware of the options that there are up on the hill, which is kind of what we've all narrowed down on, which is shared parking in the, like City Hall parking lot shared parking or other shared parking in the upper part. And, is that, what hours is that? Is that, beyond the 9 o'clock or 9:30 cutoff of the elevator? Is that beyond that time? And I think it's something we really need to think about. It starts asking a couple, because I think the elevator should be open almost every day, all really late. But then that'll be other discussions that we're going to have on, since the elevator essentially opens to a parkway and there's park hours. How does that, do you cut off the elevator hours just at park hours and that's it? Or is there some way to determine, because definitely with the changing dynamics of downtown in terms of restaurant and bar crowd, you have an audience that is staying downtown until 9:30 and then leaving. That would stay downtown and linger, go to, other places or in the future, maybe go see a show if we have a theater or a performance or something with the new Willamette Falls site. So I think we want to look towards that and so the more we can add to the survey to kind of get into that, I think it's going to be very beneficial, especially when we have our conversations about tourism and all of that, because I think, having there's so many connections here. As soon as the kiosk gets open at the elevator, that will allow us the ability also to be doing this survey to almost every single person that comes through the elevator.
Right.
So I think, we need to hone in on especially the resources that we can control every aspect of, like the elevator, and really find out, are we using that to the best of our ability, and then fill in the holes after that.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell?
There's absolutely nothing in this report that surprises me.
Right.
I mean, we all know that signage is a problem down there.
Yeah.
We know people are afraid of predatory towing. We tried to work on this signage thing, and I'm hoping that the merchants down there work together to improve it because they benefit from it, as does the city. The report shows just what I would expect, the great American tradition of one man to one car. And, and you got a small group, 2% of the bicycles, but they're absolutely fervent about what they want. And, it makes you question, obviously we want more off-street public parking. We've had that discussion and even parking structures for I don't know how many years. And maybe it's time to pull the trigger given the future of what we intend to do down there. Because we can position as such that it would lead people through our downtown area and promote commerce. It made me think about the 2-hour limit. We have a 2-hour limit down there and you have to move. Is that the right choice? And I'm not saying yay or nay, but your comment about people wanting a little bit longer parking, that they actually they don't stay longer too, but they feel better if it was longer than 2 hours.
Correct.
Kind of a strange thing. And then in the end, I'm the kind of guy that says, okay, we've got all this information. Based on the results to date, does the report suggest an action to take?
Yeah,
Good.
The report itself doesn't, because that wasn't the intent. It's really just theoretically trying to be an objective data summary. But I think it's telegraphing a lot.
So who within our organization takes that and makes something happen with it?
I think that's the job of the TDM working group. So that's what that group is tasked with, is implementing our plan, and this data is going to help us inform, what our actions are going to be.
Well, we
going
have a
forward.
working group, but at the end, some city employee is heading
Yes.
this up and saying, I'm going
That's
to make
me.
this happen. That's what I'm looking for. Not we talk about it for the next 2 years, and 3 years later, we have 3 studies and nothing, we've improved nothing.
Well, the great thing about the action plan is when it was approved by the commission, it has a schedule of immediate, near, mid, and long-term strategies.
Good.
But what's great about this start, again, one, we had no data whatsoever. We had parking data, but we didn't have any attitudinal data, is that this is going to let us refine even further those action steps. Because the plan was written step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, all the way to step 31. And I think what this is going to do is allow us to reprioritize some of the things on that list. Because we know we can do better. Because what I was struck by in the survey was when we asked the question about if you could spend a transportation dollar today, how would you spend it? And they said on parking.
That's right.
But then 50% said, but you could convince me otherwise. Potentially, I won't say you could potentially convince me otherwise if you made investments in these things. And so that's going to allow us to right-size our system. And I think your point about the elevator, I would extend it even to the off-street parking system in general.
Yeah.
No one knows that there's parking available. Everybody is reliant on the on-street system. So I think those, Commissioner, will translate into actions because the plan is calling for actions. And unfortunately, like a lot of plans, right now it's front-loaded with things like this. a parking study, an online survey. But once we get that together, the actions are, should we implement a shared use parking program? Let's implement a wayfinding program. What should it look like? How should it be designed? And where would it be located? So I'm hoping this will catalyze that.
And you mentioned the low-hanging fruit, and it's obvious where it is. I mean, signage is
Yeah,
one. Make sure
it's
people
key.
know what lots they can use after hours without fear of being towed.
Absolutely.
Make sure they're aware of the access up here, change the elevator hours. I mean, there's things that they don't take a lot to do, and they have immediate benefits.
Well, that's our hope. That's a low-hanging fruit is also defined as the least cost solutions with a big
But it's a
impact.
start. And like I said, I don't want 2 years from now to be doing the study with no tangible
With no
results.
There's more to the thing, and that is, there's a couple of lots downtown, one specifically that I know of, where the no parking signs are so low that if you pull into a spot, you can't see the sign anymore.
Cover the sign, yeah.
And so we need to have some kind of regulation about if you're gonna post it on private property, it needs to be at a level where you can see it once you've pulled into the spot.
Thank you. So for the record, wait,
Oh.
I haven't gone yet.
okay.
For the record, Mr. Dan Holliday, Mayor Holliday has joined us, if you couldn't tell by that response just a second ago. So I'd like to make a couple comments real quickly. I would agree with Commissioner O'Donnell about the 2-hour parking. I know if I go downtown and I have dinner, and if I want to hang out 2 hours, it's not enough. I'm going to be thinking about my car parked on the street, and I'm either going to have to move it or come something like that. So even just visiting on a short term, and that doesn't even include if I want to possibly go get chocolates or shopping or anything like that. So I can totally understand the comments that we received in that realm. For the biking piece, I'm sure there are probably people that, if the biking infrastructure is not readily apparent, easy ways, the bike racks, places to lock your bike, feeling like your bike's going to be secure, they're not even going to attempt to. You're never even going to get them to try it. It's a roadblock right out of the gate. And then the other thing I would think for our transportation system is what is the safety of bikers getting down the hill? I think that's going to be a pretty significant impediment. I know I've considered biking myself, and you try to pick: is it Malala Avenue? Is it, Lynn? Which has some tight curves on it with narrow shoulders. I mean, so I think that is part of the conversation for biking. I think our bike numbers could go up pretty significantly if we look at some of the safety aspects of biking, of some of those pinch points, or making sure that there's safe access to improve our biking. Because I think we have a pretty active community, and I know myself, I don't know that I would feel safe biking to downtown, but I think those numbers could go up pretty quickly, but you'll probably have to look further than just the downtown strip
Right.
to thinking about those safety improvements that can make a difference on that number. I like that you did multiple survey options of the online survey and talking to people and catching them one-on-one. I'm wondering about your response record as far as those numbers that would be useful for our communication staff, of things to consider, like how successful were you with walking up to people versus how many people took the survey online? Not just talking about results, but like, was it overwhelmingly online and that was the most successful method, or can you comment on that?
I don't have my data guy here.
Okay.
But
Then that's fine.
But we have that.
Okay.
And we would it would be nice to get regardless of what the intercept numbers were, it's always nicer to get them higher.
Yeah.
Because you can also hear the anecdotal comments rather than just have to read the written ones. So
Yeah, and then
it always get better.
really quickly, the shuttle to and from, did anybody make comments about where they wanted the shuttle? Was it top of the hill to the bottom, and like, were they specific in providing?
It wasn't
Okay.
not like the 10th and Main thing, but
Right.
I think there were the theme that I got from the comment and just previous public sessions we've had with the public here in Oregon City is a lot of people see the downtown becoming a choke point. And so they naturally say, well, if I could just, let's get people parked outside of downtown so we can bring more people into the downtown. I think it emanates from that original concept that came out of our very early work.
Yeah.
Is people identifying lots yet? No. But people are getting the point that the more cars we put into the downtown, it's just going to get messier. So if we can put them remotely, there's support for that.
I do recall one comment that suggested having a shuttle from the Amtrak station to the transit center. That was in the comments in the survey. And I just want to add too, since you all brought up things that we're actually going to be working on in the future. We do plan to do another parking study this summer, and so we would look at the utilization of every block where we have on-street parking downtown, paid and unpaid, and then above the elevator as well, within the areas that people actually park and use the elevator. And what we would get out of that parking study is recommendations on what should the durations be? So where should we change it to more than 2 hours? Should we change the times that we charge for parking? Right now, it's just 8 to 5 in the weekdays. Should that change? And so we'll be doing that work this summer, and we'll be coming back to you with the results there and recommendations. In addition to that, the grant that we have is funding a bike and ped needs inventory. So we'll be going block by block downtown and above the elevator, and hopefully outside farther for kind of the bike infrastructure piece to look at what are the low-hanging fruit improvements we can make, and then maybe some of the longer-term improvements, and creating an action plan based on that. And then lastly, we're ongoing working on the after-hours parking program. We have a meeting next week with one of the property owners downtown that's interested in participating. And we know that City Hall is going to be getting signage. And so I'm working with Lori Bell in our Economic Development Department to get those signs, have those meetings, sort out the details with the property owners and get those signs ordered so we can get them posted, hopefully this spring before kind of the busy summer season.
Are you getting much traction with the owners about setting up after-hours parking on their lots? Or is it just like a one-on-one encounter all the time? It's not a group effort?
It hasn't been a group effort, no. And, I think a lot of the, I've spoken with some owners who are reluctant to participate. We're not offering any big carrots for participation in that, right? So we wouldn't expect everybody to be running to do that. But I think once we get a couple of properties started and get the program going, then we can show that it's successful and hopefully grow it.
Yeah, I'm not thinking so much about those people that are open and need the parking for their continued business op, but I'm thinking about those people who they shut down at 5 o'clock and their lot's sitting there.
Right.
Can we use it, or do we have to be afraid of getting towed? Within the absence of a sign, you don't know. So Are we engaging those people?
We are. Christmas at the Zoo is one of those. They say, yeah, people are welcome to park in my lot, but no one knows that because there's no sign. So we're working.
We'll provide those signs?
That's the idea, yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, on the flip side of that particular issue, if somebody goes downtown and you'll see this especially like the Fallsview Tavern on a Friday night, and when I drive by on Saturday morning, there'll be 6 or 8 cars that are still parked there at 7 o'clock in the morning. And so what do you do about the folks who park at some of those surface lots downtown and God bless them, got drunk and took an Uber or a taxi home, and their car is still in the lot the next morning? So that's an issue that we also have to make sure that the signage displays that the car has to be gone by 6 o'clock in the morning or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Commissioner Smith.
And the dialogue that we had with the City Hall parking lot was whether or not that would be consistent with other city-owned lots, like the lot on the VFW Hall or Pioneer Center or any of those, and that never came back as a discussion, and how those signs might be designed in a way that has the ability for special events. If there's a special big meeting tonight at the City Hall, that something can be changed on that sign that says no parking tonight, or there's an event at the library or something, how do we do that? And that if we're going to be doing signs for City Hall like this spring, then we need to have thought all that out.
Yes, we
Well-
are thinking about all that.
For City Hall, and I think City Hall is probably
Yeah, oh, for sure.
the closest one. I think an electronic sign on the building that announces in big red letters, hey, no parking, no public
I'm
parking
not sure you
tonight.
can do electronic
Unless you're-
signs in McLaughlin neighborhood, but.
We are working through the details, though. We heard you at your last
You could
meeting.
do one on the inside of our conference room right there. As long as it designs a window, it's
Oh
okay.
my gosh, you're right.
We heard your direction to identify
right.
busy nights, and we're on it.
They're working on it.
All right. Are we done with this?
I think so.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, sir. Appreciate your time. So we'll move on to the Malala Avenue Streetscape project, Mr. Lewis. You gonna be able to wrap this up in 20 minutes?
I can try. We can try.
No, you can do.
Thank you, Mayor and City Commissioners, and thank you for taking the time to hear this topic. So we're here to talk about Malala Avenue, and really the original intent of this was to give you an update about some of the construction that was coming your way. We've heard we got some feedback. Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell, for some of that feedback. We want to touch on some of those items tonight as well. Brian Van Smorenberg, new to the city. He is the man for the project here. So he started in September, and he's been responsible for the final design and carrying this project on through construction. So he's going to take on some of the original stuff, and then some of those detailed questions about some of the community feedback we had. I'm going to take those on. So with that, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for letting us be here to share in this this update. I'm Brian Van Smornberg. I'm Senior Project Engineer, and I'm the guy that's going to be on the ground working with the people and the businesses along the way when it goes into construction and so forth. I'm also supposed to be I'll be the face of Malala Avenue with that. And we're moving forward to get this out to contract. History of this, of course, is this is an old highway road, ODOT highway road, and it's a market road, and it definitely wasn't built the way we'd want it to be built for a city road and arterial, and we are moving forward to meet some of the goals of the commission to goal to actually build out this project and build out the street to what we would like that road to look like. So this will be, the Malala Avenue will be a central corridor for the businesses along the route from the very bottom of Oregon City on to the top. And it's a pretty busy road. It has about 14,000 ADT, and that's daily traffic. And the vehicles will be there. It's on because it seems to be pretty busy it is busy for a 2-lane road. Of course, we'll be talking a little bit about the Beaver Creek Road here shortly, and that's more of a major arterial. And some of the existing conditions along the route, we have a lot of, the pavement is deteriorating in that section that we're improving. It has sidewalks that are here and there in the section that we're improving, and also along there we have issues. We have sidewalks and ramps that are not to standards. So we're looking at increasing the ped safety along the way. The corridor, what we're planning on doing is, of course, enhancing all of those things and increasing the availability for bikes to go through, the peds to walk and so forth, and improve the streetscape. What we'll be talking about is the public outreach that we're doing and what we've done, and the congestions that we have around the Beaver Creek area. Also, the funding of the project and acquisition and tree removal that we've already begun. So yeah, I'm sure everyone's noticed that. And then things to expect during construction regarding traffic and status and timeline. So starting with the public outreach, we've been involved in public outreach for a while, even before I came on board. And we've had neighborhood meetings. And what we've done is we've really brought it down to, bringing it out to the neighborhoods and getting their input. And with that, we have a site that we've actually taken in all their information, all their questions, and we've responded and used it as kind of the clearinghouse for these key events. And that site will give you all the information on the project and give you updates along the way, along with the updates on the questions that have been asked of us, and also how we would deal with it if we could have some changes made and so forth. And we addressed a lot of the changes, and a lot of them are really great questions, and we've made changes along the way. With that, the outreach we hit currently, we placed postcards out, 900 postcards out, and we've been included with these updates, the postcards and so forth. We've dealt a lot with the tree removal that's been going on, and what we're planning to do here in the future. Also with the PG is moving forward with moving their poles, and that's a big part of the project, actually. It's a critical timeline to get those poles moved so that we can move on with the project. We went out and did social media posts. With these social media posts, we've hit Nextdoor, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and so forth. And we've really reached out. We reached out to 2,500 people just using the social media. Along with that, we have an email of interested parties, so you can always sign up on that. And whenever an update comes around, we will post out or we'll send out emails on those updates, and so they'll get information on what's going on with the project. And then we've also put out a project sign just lately, and along with that project sign, it was really put out early because we wanted to get some information out on what was really going on with all the trees being removed and poles, starting to be placed and so forth. So, but we also just as a note, that sign will be coming down, and we'll be putting two new signs up, because we found that those signs are a little bit small for the project. So we built out another sign that should be coming in this week. So, and those signs didn't go to waste, because we actually had in mind on our contract to use some other smaller signs that would be in another location. We're going to be posting newsletters out to the public when the contract goes out and it's the bid's ready to get, or we award the bid, and that newsletter will tell when we're going to have an open house for construction. And then you can always find on our concern log, you can go to the concern log and look that up. You can hit that this bit.ly that's shown up there, and that bit.ly basically is the direct access to the project. But the easier way, if you don't remember that address all the time, walk around thinking about that address, you can just go Molalla Avenue on our main city website, or just Molalla, and it'll be the first item up. So you can click on that, and then you can go into the projects for their update. Now, John will speak on southbound turn lanes.
All right, so I wanted to take on a few of the issues that are still kind of outstanding out there and of community interest. And again, we feel like we've worked through most of these. There's 3 slides here that I'm going to toggle back and forth. So I think just thinking through my speaker points a little bit more, each one of them shows something different. But I want to come back to this specific question about should the city be considering adding a right turn lane off of Malala Avenue onto Beaver Creek Road westbound. So that's one little element that I wanted to show you. This one here is really a graphic that we've created for the project that includes some of the improvements that we're doing right at Beaver Creek and Malala Avenue intersection. And this shows, for the most part, what we're planning to do. And then in the box there, we took a look at just kind of the complexity of adding that right turn lane on Malala Avenue and turning westbound on Beaver Creek Road. So that's showing we're not planning to do that, but we're just kind of showing that and looking at some of the implications that that right turn lane might have. As I talk through this, you'll find that, we're looking at that. That's likely to be something we need to consider in the future. It's not necessary right now, but when we do, we're going to have some impacts there. We may have some impacts to that property. And then so I'm going to kind of start with this one in this topic here. So this is a photo from we've got new pan and tilt cameras, by the way, on Malala Avenue that can zoom to various locations and take a closer look at that. And so we have access to that now, and the county also has access to that as well. So this is just a picture that was taken at about 3:30 on a Tuesday, and it kind of indicates some of the concern that we've had kind of moving into this project, and something we've been talking about for a while now is this idea of creating, taking the 2 through lanes and, right now there's a single left turn lane and the 2 through lanes, and converting one of those through lanes into an additional left turn lane. And part of that is to get traffic. Our original thought on that was that we kind of need to do that during construction for sure, right? There's the idea of trying to divert traffic around the project site. What first kind of became evident to us as we were thinking about just constructability and how to move traffic off of Malala Avenue and get them around. We've seen through the traffic data that was collected for the project that there's probably close to 600 trips that use Malala Avenue as a cut through town that don't really even stop in that section of Malala Avenue between Beaver Creek and Highway 213. So we started looking at it then, and then as we started looking at it more just in our use and focus on Malala Avenue, we kind of watched this left turn pocket kind of fill up regularly and back out into the through traffic. And so we noticed it, our traffic engineer, Kittleson Associates, definitely noticed it in some of their things. So pretty early on in the evaluation of the project, this came to light, and they made some suggestions. So really this is just a graphic that shows kind of some of the thing that pointed us at that concern.
Back up. I'm going to stop you right there.
Okay.
Because this picture is a prime example of what Mr. Gifford, Mr. Danielson, and Commissioner O'Donnell talked about, and that is that if we look at the right-hand, I don't know, is it eastbound, northbound lane, whatever, on Malala Avenue?
Yes.
Northbound.
It's empty at 3:30 in the afternoon. So why not shift everything over one lane? Because this is only 2 lanes for approximately 2 blocks before it goes back to 1 lane. And that gives you the ability to put in that right-hand turn lane. And it doesn't really cost you anymore because all you're doing is restriping the street.
So we're going to talk about that.
I know we are.
Yes, we should. It's a good idea.
I'm so glad you want to talk about that because I have it on my agenda. So a couple things. While we're on that topic, so we asked Kittleson Associates to look at a variety of alternatives, including this right turn that we're talking about from the southbound Malala Avenue onto Beaver Creek westbound. And then the other thing that came up at the same time when that suggestion was Mr. Gifford also brought up this idea of shifting all the lanes over and to the east and providing a single through lane on Malala Avenue. So creating kind of the same scenario that we're creating on this side for the other side, right? So surprisingly, there's a lot more turns that make that right turn in the northbound direction than on the westbound direction, if that makes sense. So I'd like to use the pointer. So follow me along here, Lisa, just so.
Sorry.
Did I do that?
No, that was me. I apologize.
Okay, here we go.
There we go.
So, you're talking this lane here, why not? Because it drops basically, right? I mean, it starts right here and then carries on through and then further on drops, right? So why not move all these lanes over to kind of that skip line there and allow traffic to use that outside through lane? And then that would provide enough room for these two turn lanes and two through lanes, one of which could also provide the right turn. So we looked at that. And we also looked at this idea of a right turn lane with just the through traffic and then, assuming you put an extra lane in there, what that would look like. And really the big concern about both of those right turn movements is pedestrian traffic that crosses that intersection right there. So the concern that William brought up, which I think is a good one, is look, the pedestrians, if you get increased pedestrians, which we're all hoping for along Malala Avenue, what does that do to that through movement in this scenario? What does it, because if this car wants to make a right turn, it could block that, right? So adding, the analysis showed adding this, it's a big ask, but in our analysis, it does benefit that concern, right? It obviously provides for more flexibility for through traffic. It's also a significant cost and something that we should think about in the future, but not necessarily build today. Our analysis looked at that in a 2040 analysis, so full build out. And the improvement is slight, but there is potential for delay there because of pedestrian traffic.
There's a lot of potential for delay.
Right.
If you paid any attention to when ACF went in and we turned that into a one lane, it backed up all the way to Eastham School every day. So if you start stopping traffic there because of pedestrian, that means that's going to back up every light cycle until it gets all the way to Main Street.
Not according to the analysis. And the same problem, only worse, happens on the other side. So that same scenario occurs on this side, only in a bigger way because there's more folks, about double, that make the right turn from this direction.
But we're fixing that, right?
No, we're not creating that problem because we've got two through lanes on that side of the intersection, right? Right now, we're showing two through lanes right there. And the suggestion was if we moved everything over one full lane and converted that to one lane, then all of a sudden we have really pretty much the same concern that was presented on this side.
I don't think that's what we're talking about. What we're talking about is making the right lane, if you're going from Fred Meyer towards Grocery Outlet, make that right lane a right turn only onto Beaver Creek. And you make the left lane a straight through lane. And if they have to shift a lane to get into the through lane, going farther south down Malala, that's not a huge deal.
But the idea for doing that is to shift these lanes further over, right? So that then all of a sudden you can create this without impacting the bank. Right. And in order to do that, so we're talking about lane alignment problems that you're talking moving the through lane into an oncoming lane, right? That's what
Well, if you're blind and using a, red tip cane, you're assuming that all people are stupid.
No, I'm not.
Well, sure looks like it to me.
I think the other thing that we look at is this turn lane here is also determined to be needed in the future. And part of this originally was looked at for a temporary solution to divert traffic during construction. As we look at that, we said, that's not a very difficult thing to do under the current signal configuration. So current signal arms, current signal placements. All of that can happen without any changes to mast arms. Right. Any changes like what we're talking about, moving further lane and further signals, do have impacts on those signal mast arms. So there's lots of consideration for this intersection. If you remember, this intersection was outside of our original scope, but definitely as we look at what we could do to kind of help alleviate the temporary solution, we realized, oh, that could happen permanently too without any additional costs. So again, when we looked at this configuration, converting this to a single lane failed the intersection, and it failed it because of that right turn lane. Now, we looked at that as if everything was to move over. You're suggesting something a little bit different, but when we heard from at the Transportation Advisory Committee about what was being suggested, it was to move everything over, including the lanes on the other side of the intersection.
And there's the old saying that the perfect is the enemy of the good. And that is that everything can't be perfect. We survived with a misaligned Malala or Warren Milne and whatever the road is across the street for 50 years and nobody died.
But I don't think that the project scope and budget planned on that type of intersection improvement, which is why you're considering, I mean, it was a consideration as a temporary to try to work on the traffic, but then looking at it, so it's, what's being proposed can be accommodated within the current project scope and budget, whereas the other alternatives doesn't sound like can be accommodated correctly. Is that correct?
Not without taking on, much larger change of this signalized intersection. So, I mean, that was the other piece is, any additional signal changes would be, yet another project cost. We could take those on, but that's well beyond what we had intended to originally.
And also, we have to take into account that we didn't see the physical results of closing a lane on Malala Avenue until the ACF clinic was built, and we saw the disaster the traffic caused during those just a couple, 3 weeks of that closure. So imagine that, because at this intersection especially, you get people that are coming from the nursing home and the apartments and all those things that are walking across to the shopping center. And there are numerous times when I'm going to county meetings where, I have to wait for maybe a whole light cycle or two to get across because there are pedestrians in the way and you just can't make the right-hand turn.
Yeah, but the backup, though, the major backups we're having is because there's only one turn lane. I mean, that runs into, so when you close a lane, people can't go straight, and they can't also, we don't have the capacity to back up a double turn lane.
I understand that. I think we need the double turn lanes going to Beaver Creek towards 211, or 213, whichever it is.
So,
but I think there is capacity to do what we're talking about without dramatically increasing the cost of the project. If you put your engineers and your brains together and decide that that's what you want to do versus we've already decided this is what we're going to do and we're just going to fight against any changes.
Well, we're not fighting against change. We're proposing a lot of change, a significant amount of change, especially at this intersection. What I'm saying is this intersection has got a lot of traffic congestion already. It's near capacity most of the time. And the improvements that we're proposing here, again, they're based on theoretical models, but they're informed theoretical models, and they're telling us that this is a good solution. It gets traffic both temporarily and as we're proposing it, permanently. Now, traffic will, especially during the year of construction that we're going to have, or a little more than a year of construction that we're going to have, it may find that the better route to the county campus is by way of Warner Milne, right? So that AFC corner that you're talking about, that may become more the norm than this corner becomes the norm. We don't know exactly how this is going to adjust. And the modeling that we did on this assumed a couple of things. It assumed 2040 transportation rates. It also assumed twice the amount of pedestrian traffic that we have today. And when you apply twice the amount of traffic congestion, it's almost as if you're hitting that signal pedestrian button every cycle. So it really has an impact to that intersection. And with that, is there going to be more congestion? Sure. Does it mean more delay to the overall intersection? Yes, it does. It's not a perfect situation. And like I've said many times about this project, it would be so nice to have a gridded street network in Oregon City. We don't have that kind of a scenario, right? So we're trying to provide you a recommendation and a project that does, that spends your money wisely on both temporary and what we are proposing as permanent solutions here. We could do the other option, which is to put it in temporarily and pull it all out afterwards and put it back to the way it was. Something that would, I think, have an impact on kind of some of the other improvements that we're doing on the other side of the intersection. But there is that option. I mean, if this commission really wants to direct that kind of a change, we could do that, and we will do that.
We're not talking about during construction, we're talking about living our lives after construction. And
Right.
I think you're going to find fairly soon on, after construction, if you build it this way, that right lane is going to back up all the way to at least Holmes Lane, if not all the way to Pearl or Eastham School. Because people just aren't going to be able to go through the intersection towards Fred Meyer because they're being held up by pedestrians. I don't see how a single lane that accommodates both through traffic and right turn traffic is going to work there. I just don't see it. Now, I'm not an engineer, but I have driven more than 2 million miles in the Portland metro region since I've been working. So I'm pretty familiar with almost every intersection in the Portland metro region.
Yeah, but you have to take into account that they did traffic modeling on this. I mean, you either are throwing out all of the traffic engineering and the modeling and saying, I just don't believe the numbers, just doubling congestion with it doubling the pedestrian numbers and just saying, I don't like what the model is telling us. I mean, their model is saying that this is a good solution. So moving away from that is pretty much just discarding all of that.
I don't think so. But beyond that, the question is, if we had built I-205 in 1973 with 4 lanes in each direction, we wouldn't be doing that again now for billions of dollars. So the question is, do we spend the money now to fix it right the first time?
In Beaver Creek.
Or, yeah, well, that too, but, or do we, wait for 20 years and have it cost us 5 times as much?
I think the city's effort to look at this intersection is going to be definitely in the next TSP, which is less than 5 years away. So this intersection is well on our horizon. I mean, again, we're at that point in time, the signal life of what's there now is going to be that much older, and, that may be the right time to identify that project. But right now is not the right time to do that. And it's
According to you.
Sure.
Okay.
To me.
So the fact is that we also have a courthouse project coming up, which is going to totally change traffic patterns at the county facility.
And at that time, there may be an opportunity to condition this right turn lane on the county's courthouse project. So,
how much more time do you have in the presentation?
Depends on how much time we want to talk about details, because there's.
Well, I think we're gonna have to move this to another work session, because I don't want to.
I agree, because I have things to say.
Yeah, I don't want to delay the meeting another half hour or 20 minutes to deal with this. This needed an hour all by itself. And it's not your fault or anybody else's fault, but I think unless somebody wants to argue about that, I think we're going to move on. And
we do intend to bid this project in the next 2 weeks. So submit it out for bid.
Well, you're going to have to back that off a little bit then. We need to have another work session before you do that. And I think, is there any argument about that?
No, I agree with it. I mean, I'm sitting here and I know there's theory versus reality, and the reality was demonstrated during the ACF event, and we saw what that occurred. And, I've got a lot of comments to make, but tonight's not the night to make them. So let's move on.
Let's set this for an hour work session, either prior to or adjacent with the first meeting in March, unless you guys want to have a special work session for it.
Well, I would like to know the impact of us putting this off to the Malala Avenue project.
A 2-week delay in the bid process translates roughly into a 2-week delay in the construction project.
Any impact on the funding? Okay.
Okay, then we have our decision. We're gonna take 5 minutes and we'll start the regular meeting at 7:15.